The reading I've chosen is from Matthew's Gospel. It's chapter 8 and I'm beginning to read at verse 5. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help. "Lord," he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering." Jesus said, "I will go and heal him." But the servant replied, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, and I have soldiers under my authority. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was astonished, and said to those following him, "I tell you the truth, not even in Israel have I found such great faith." Tomorrow I will have been ordained 33 years. It was on the 28th of June 1987 that I was ordained a deacon in the Church of England, that I first took the title Reverend, that I put on a clerical collar. I haven't even got one on at the moment, for the first time. And then a year later, in the normal way, I was ordained priest. But what is ordination? I mean, there are many Christian churches that don't have ordained ministers. They don't have priests at all. Come to think of it, Jesus never had priests. He never ordained anyone. And I think the most likely reason is that as soon as you start ordaining people and giving them a title, you create an impression that they're somehow, above the sort of the ordinary believer, a little bit closer to God, a little bit more holy, perhaps a bit more likely for God to use them. When the truth is that actually God is just as likely to use, the least of people, the most unlikely of people. So Jesus just took simple, ordinary folk and said, "Come, follow me." So why then do we ordain people and create this kind of, clergy level when it's obviously going to have problems, and there are definitely people who see us clergy and somehow think that we must be closer to God, which is ridiculous, and it's not easy to work with that. But there is at least one good reason for ordaining people, and it's actually about human weakness. You see, people's hunger for religious truth and meaning in their life, their hunger for some spiritual experience is so strong that it can be taken advantage of by people who are often gifted leaders, charismatic characters, people who can convince you that they are speaking on God's behalf when really they've got their own agenda. And that is why religious leaders should always be part of a community, a structure which holds them to account. And I think that's probably the best thing about it. Of course, it doesn't always work. In the Church of England, sadly, recently, we've heard stories of priests who've abused their authority and their position, and in other denominations too. But the structures should have been there, even if they failed on those times. And now, of course, the churches are watching us priests more carefully, and so they should. But I'd have to say, even 33 years ago and before, I was certainly watched and examined and written reports about for 4 years before I got through the selection process. You know, people were watching and reporting on me and sending me through experiences and seeing how I got on. And then for 3 years through theological college, you know, doing a degree in pastoral studies, in biblical studies. And then even once I was ordained, I spent almost 4 years serving like an apprenticeship, really, as a curate under a vicar, before the church would consider that I was ready to go off and have a ministry unsupervised. And even now, of course, you know, I have to have my ministry evaluated, reviewed every few years. So it goes on. Now, that might seem like a bit of a grim reason to say having ordained ministers, having priests is a good thing. But remember the words of the centurion in that gospel that I just read. I am a man under authority, and so I have people who are under my authority. And that is the way it has to be, you know, within the church. That's the way it was for Jesus, which is why he was so pleased with what the centurion said. It's because Jesus was so directly under God's authority. That was why he had authority in his own ministry. As a priest, I am a man under authority and accountable to the church. And it's only because of that that I can really ask people to recognise and respect the authority I may have in the church and as a minister. Of course, it only works if the church is working hand in hand with God. If the church is under God's authority, only then it works. And, well, it's not always so that the church is hand in hand with God. But it does happen sometimes, maybe a lot of the time. And it has been wonderful to witness it and be part of it when it has happened. And it's been wonderful to be an ordained priest under the authority of a church which is working hand in hand with God, and to exercise that position of leadership within it. And thank you all who may be watching, especially my 3 congregations, for allowing me to have that ministry. Amen.